So the energy is light. Right now, I just paused, the reel, and I'm just watching purely by the fire. The energy is light, really light. Ethereal, charged, high in vibrations. Yeah, that's all. Ethereal with a slight touch of the astral. I would say it's more of the etheric layer.
You're talking about those glares, right?
Yeah. So I'm manually stopping each of them one by one right now.
Explain what you mean. So, are you saying that these aren't just camera glares and not Photoshop, but actually something that is truly energy charged?
Not all of them, some of them. The third one, where it's like this, I'll show the camera to everyone right now.
So, you're saying that's not a glare?
No, there's a charge.
All right, so what is it then?
In esotericism, this is usually called an etheric flare. That is when the etheric field, the etheric layer, yes, it starts to flare up for some reason, and actually for different reasons. So again, the etheric plane is usually not visible, right? But here it kind of comes to the surface as if it appears in the physical realm. That's it. And this can happen for various reasons. By the way, it can be due to purely atmospheric reasons. It can also be due to reasons related to some anomalies of this place. So if it's generally an anomalous place, like if there are some ruptures, faults in the Earth's crust and so on, all of that affects it. It's kind of like, an energy volcano, like an energetic volcano, and that's how these things start to erupt from there.
So, is it just, roughly speaking, the energy of the place being released, or is it a self-aware being, like it says there, an angel?
Hold on. I'll tell you exactly. There's a bit of elemental energy there. In other words, for those who know, these are certain spirits, spirits of the elements, spirits of the place, but they always take part in processes like this. Guys, look at this. Now I'm addressing the viewers. When you possess this kind of self-aware energy, especially coming from such a powerful being as an angel, it is definitely going to radiate outward. So, for example, if you take 3 cards and draw a line on one of them, that's a standard exercise for extrasensory perception. And as for telekinesis, by the way, when you are doing this, the most difficult part is actually trying to catch at least some of the energy coming from the cards. Why is that? Because the card itself contains extremely weak energy overall. If we were to place, for example, an actual human being right next to these cards, then human energy will radiate much more strongly. That's why, for most people, it's much easier to read a person, for example. And an angel, well, it is actually a luminous and energetic structure, right? It is entirely woven together from pure energy. It doesn't just radiate energy, it should basically hit you, as they say, right, with this energy straight in the forehead. So that's not the case here. This is energy. I mean, I feel a powerful surge of energy. It's quite a charged surge of energy. It is truly intense. It actually feels quite a bit electrified. This electrification always accompanies the process during which the surge occurs. All of these effects are not divine angels in the classical sense traditionally. Rather, it is a certain disturbance occurring within the realms of the etheric astral, of the planet's layer, but more of the etheric one, which in principle is consistent with the idea of the Schumann resonances. There is actually, I remember, a separate scientific research institute that studies and records these very vibrations. The Schumann resonances, you can even track them online there. You can call them Schumann resonances, or you can call them something else. That's really a matter of terminology. That's a question for physicists, for electrophysicists, who specifically measure these vibrational components. Whether it's increasing or not, that's for them to answer. As an esotericist, I would say that the energy background itself is indeed rising, and it doesn't matter what we call this background. That is the truth. These manifestations, these energetic bursts, including those in the etheric layer, in the etheric layers, are actually more like a multi-layered cake. This is also one of the primary accompanying factors of the rise in vibrations because energy shifts. The rise in vibrations, as we've said many times before, is a specific engineering solution. It's not happening by chance. It's not just happening on its own, being raised by someone somewhere or randomly. No. They are being raised by certain forces, using specific technical methods and things of that nature. For example, voltage surges in certain areas of the planet are a completely normal phenomenon during any kind of energetic restructuring. It's like, I don't know, maybe it is certainly not the most elegant or prettiest analogy to use in, But when someone finally starts up an old car that has been sitting idle for a very long time, it inevitably sputters and coughs quite a bit, and from the exhaust pipes, all sorts of smoke, steam, and so on come out. But it is exactly the same thing happening here. When there's a rise in vibrational, specifically when the layers across the planet are affected and overall the energy intensifies, then these powerful surges can definitely occur quite frequently, especially in specific geographical places that, as people often say, are very much like the planet's exhaust system if you were to compare it to the way cars function. Most often, these are the so-called energetically active zones. That is, in Russia, by the way, there are a lot of them, especially in Siberia, in the Ural region, near the Ural Mountains. In these places, it's simply easier to release tension and accumulate new energy. It's easier. These are the so-called anomalous zones. By the way, if anyone is interested in learning more about anomalous zones, give this a like. If there are a lot of likes, we'll make a separate episode specifically about anomalous zones. We could even, just for fun, visit different anomalous zones. For example, at one time we took a very detailed look at the so-called Votovara. That's what it turns out to be. Karelia, it's a very unique place. We also looked into the Sunduki. In Khakassia, yes, and a few other similar places as well. If this sounds interesting to you, let us know. There is already a wealth of information available on these topics.
And also write which specific places you're interested in, and we'll take a look. I think you've heard that a lot of people basically live according to these so-called Schumann frequencies. There are people who post graphs every day showing what's going on today, some kind of load. Tomorrow it's a discharge, and so on. And there are people who are very sensitive to these fluctuations. Some get headaches, others experience something else. So I want you to rise to a higher perspective, to the higher self, and let's talk about whether this really has any basis, or if it's just people who are, let's say, weather sensitive, or people attributing their traumas or quirks, as usual, to anything and everything.
So,
Where do we draw the line? Where is it really about some kind of Schumann resonance, right? These vibrations or background frequencies are rising, whatever you want to call it, right? So where is this actually happening? And where is it just everything being lumped together as usual under one umbrella? Like yesterday you ate something wrong and now you say, oh, it's the Schumann resonance, it went up. So where exactly is that line? And to what extent do people really need to monitor this, pay close attention to it, and structure their daily lives and rhythms according to it?
to begin with, I just touch a little on the energy of the planet, the Earth, on its, so to speak, background basic energy level. I would describe it like this. By the way, at first I wanted to describe it as a sea, but it's not a sea. If it is a sea, then it's kind of, a tilted sea at a certain angle. That is, we really do see growth. There is definitely growth happening.
So, what are these flashes then?
There are these sudden flashes, because, again, it's not a steady climb straight to the top, but rather it actually looks more like this pattern here. Up, then a little down, up again, then a little down again, like those peaks on a cardiogram. I can confirm that, yes, it's true, that's how it is.
What is the nature of these flashes? I understood that the vibrations are rising. You always say that, but specifically, what is the nature of these flashes? Who creates these flashes? Or do they occur on their own in some natural way?
It's a consequence. That is, I don't see anyone, this is 100%, I don't see anyone who would be sitting there and pressing a button, impulse, 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 impulse. I don't see anything like that.
So we can definitively rule out civilizations or someone else sending us some kind of light streams or something like that.
Not exactly. They might be able to send down light streams, but these flashes, that doesn't work that way. So what do you think? A light stream comes down and immediately a flash goes off.
Blink?
No, look, any planet is a complex living mechanism. And you can nurture and care for it like, I don't know, like a delicate plant, like a cat or like a dog. You can nourish it with different kinds of food. Maybe, again, maybe tonight is just an evening of incorrect comparisons, but still, yes, a cat won't go to the bathroom immediately after eating that food. I mean, honestly, if it needs to use the litter box right away, then that's a cat with a problem.
I see.
So these peaks are like distinct and sudden bursts, powerful and intense surges of energy that are moving upward. By the way, I noticed there are also reverse bursts when the surge goes not up but down. So basically, it can be a sudden spike of energy upward, or on the contrary, a sharp drop downward. And it's not necessarily across the whole planet. It can also be in certain specific areas, especially those close to anomalous zones, to anomalous areas. So overall, yes, because some people, those who visit anomalous zones, say that they experience either a surge of energy or, on the contrary, a drain. This is exactly what you might call, let's say, an energy spike upwards, or conversely, a drop in energy downwards. By the way, we have a house in the Moscow region, and there's actually an anomalous zone there for real. On all the maps made by ufologists and other folks, they describe all these surrounding forests as anomalous zones, as lost places. People have seen all sorts of strange things there. Some people wandered around for hours and ended up almost as if in old villages from the 18th century all of a sudden. So it's really an unusual and anomalous place, and I personally felt it there, especially as a child. On some days, the energy is just flowing, it's exceptionally bright and incredibly fresh and vibrant. And on some days, you just feel like hanging yourself. So it's really like, it's the same forest, but on certain days, it's as if it's staring right at you. It looks a bit creepy. And everyone feels it, even those who usually don't sense anything. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the energy there is so incredibly elevated and intense, so high. When the energy is being loaded, the actual electrical surge doesn't actually happen right away. The energy upload is constantly coming in, right here. From various sources, including those so-called curators we've talked about many times before, and all sorts of extraterrestrial civilizations as well, it's the same thing. There are also some other instances involved. In other words, a large number of souls participate in the energy exchange of planet Earth. A large number of souls, each of whom, as they say, is working at their own job. That means it's like a job. It's like, I don't know, like a big project. There are brand managers, there are PR managers. It's exactly the same here. Any planet is a huge energy project. There are many different processes involved. In addition to many other complex factors, there is a highly intricate and diverse logistical system for delivering energy to this specific object. And these emissions are merely a natural and inevitable consequence of the operation of this mechanism for elevating the frequency of vibrations. It is very much like a car moving forward and emitting exhaust gases as it travels. Again, these things are not entirely interconnected. Of course, one naturally follows from the other, but it's not a direct correlation. It's a somewhat indirect connection between the energetic infusion into the planet and these flares, and the flares, they are rather a direct consequence of the process of raising vibration. Sometimes they can coincide with some strong infusions. Yes, they can coincide. But sometimes they don't. That's absolutely true. Sometimes they simply do not. Sometimes, let's say, the initial infusion took place a month ago, and then for the whole month, these intense flares just keep happening. As a consequence, again, of this continuous upward movement along the energetic wave.
So why are these vibrations generally increasing then?
Vibrations are increasing because right now there's a set tendency for them to rise. That's the current game. Vibrations are rising because, well, ever since the Renaissance, everything has shot upward quite sharply because that is the path right now. So, again, look, any planet is, once more, just like a kind of large-scale engineering project. A new manager steps into the room and announces to the team, guys, let's do this, let's change this project, and now we'll play a bit on different, so to speak, markets under completely different conditions. And the souls who resonate with this say, interesting, all right, we'll stay in this project. Those who aren't interested at all decide to move on to other things. So, at a certain stage, our planet sharply went downward. It was in late Atlantis that this very collapse downward began. So, at that time, as they often say, the powerful forces, the curators, decided to do it in this specific way. Many souls left here. I just remember a number of my past lives, so to speak. Don't take it for schizophrenia. I think that here, on this channel, everyone is already used to it. I remember quite clearly and in detail a number of my past lives, specifically in Atlantis, and back then many were leaving.
From this server in general? From
this server, yes.
By what means were they leaving?
Of their own free will.
Well, how do you see it? A person would die and no longer reincarnate. Yes.
and would no longer come here because, so to speak, the higher self, the noto, it is as if they would disconnect from this server and transfer over to some other server, to that planet, to that world, or to that entirely different dimension which much better suited those specific souls. Many of these souls, these so-called bright and pure ones, they would leave at that particular time and really go to completely different planets altogether. That is exactly why many of them, including the indigo children and the crystal children, are precisely those souls who were living in Atlantis. Now they are coming back again. By the way, many of them are actually quite deeply horrified. I see a lot of younger individuals, including those who come to my school, to the higher self. They say that they do not feel at home or comfortable here at all, that it is all darkness and constant screaming, because, well, how can anyone possibly live in such a way? By the way, this is actually the main sign that the soul has more often incarnated in other worlds, and now it just happened to end up here. But here it's also important to emphasize that if you have already come here, as they say, it may feel a bit unfamiliar to you, but from the level of the higher self, there was a reason, a purpose for coming specifically here. There was a specific plan there, a reason why you are needed here on this planet. Almost all of these souls come here with a particular mission, that is, to be needed here during this great transition. This is, of course, a bit off our main topic today, but it's a very important part because for many people this is truly significant, and a lot of people ask me about it.
Well, let's say a few words about the Schumann resonance, about these downloads, these bursts. As I said, there are many very sensitive people, potentially even those you just mentioned.
Yes, and
Some people's bodies react, some experience certain events in their lives, like insights and so on. Is it even worth monitoring these bursts at all or paying attention to them in some way?
now let's look again when it comes to these bursts. Yes, just before we started filming, I actually went to the Tomsk University website. And according to the Tomsk University website, well, they're still there. There's this main line with mild bursts, and these mild bursts, according to the chart, happen almost every day. So basically, this field is always a little bit unsettled, and to actually sit and monitor it, for example, on this website or on scientists' websites in general, well, I wouldn't do that. In general, again, as I've said many times before, I'm not a fan of terminology, and I'm not a fan of certain kinds of things like, systems, especially those you have to constantly monitor and keep a close track of, because that way you can actually end up with neuroses. I mean, if you're consistently monitoring and tracking, like, you see that something has flared up on the chart, and then some esoteric person says that today there were just so many hertz piling on top of one another.
Mercury is in retrograde.
And Mercury is also in retrograde. So Mercury is pressing down on us, and these hertz are piling up too. Yeah, and then there are some major fault lines appearing. And even Cryon said that this is the most unfavorable month of all. And you sit there, and that's it. You already feel absolutely terrible, awful, just truly awful from every single side. Even though before that everything was more or less okay. That's why here I'm speaking purely as a practitioner of these arts. If you really want to truly feel and deeply understand all these processes, then learn to sense them on your own. This is specifically tailored for you. At this stage, are the energies coming in harmonious or not? And overall, are they coming in at all? Or as they say, maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration because small streams are constantly coming in, but the big wave-like ones arrive about once every 2 to 3 months. And they don't necessarily feel terrible, like giving you a headache or anything like that. Very often, especially in light of the rising vibrations, it's actually quite a pure energy. Yes, of course, it can hit you a bit in the head, as they say, especially for those who have certain karmic issues to work through. It's easier, and easier meaning it's like this. It stirs up a bit of that inner dirt. But again, try to learn to really feel it, to truly feel it on your own, through your higher self, for example. This is a very good method. On our blog, and there will be links somewhere directly below this video, we often describe this process in great detail. Specifically, we focus on these main energy bursts, those powerful main energies that are being downloaded. We also write extensively about this topic as well, so you can easily track it all through our blog, but still, first and foremost, learn to sense things on your own. That way you'll save yourself from false neurosis, for one. And two, you'll begin to perceive and understand it more calmly, more clearly, with greater distinction and independently. Additionally, each wave carries once again a slightly different message. Sometimes it's such a fresh and pure message that you can create a wide variety of truly harmonious things with it. And sometimes it's the opposite. As far as I understand, this process often plays out, so to speak, on certain contradictions. That is, at first they send one kind of energy, it passes, and then this mechanism still rolls back a bit, like a ship that rises on the waves and then falls back down. So this naturally happens during the entire downward movement. You can also really feel this wave and, in a certain way, use it to your own personal advantage. By the way, regarding that retrograde Mercury, which we talked about earlier, I wouldn't be so completely categorical here either, because then again, everyone is quite different. The energies of retrograde Mercury, as they say, are also a little different from one Mercury to another, from year to year. People have different makeups. For example, I like to launch groups during retrograde Mercury. That is, for me, groups that are launched during retrograde Mercury always do better. First and foremost, learn to sense things on your own. You don't need to look at charts, fancy words, formulas, or anything else like that. Take those things in as background information, but only as some additional food for thought. And always, always determine everything for yourself. Any energy, define it through your own experience. That way, you'll be able to fully use for good all the energies that come to our planet. And for that, among other things, there is the Higher Self School, there are discounted groups, and so on. There are also individual courses and other options. All the links are below this video. Please feel free to join us. It will be interesting. In fact, in July, we're launching a new discounted group. By the way, it's actually one of the largest groups the school has had in the past 12 years. So if you'd like, as they say, to become a part of it, this community of people who are learning to truly feel for themselves, rather than relying on charts, diagrams, or the words of bloggers, if that's what you're looking for, you're very welcome. I'll be glad to have you.
My dear friends, for 10 years now, I've been teaching a course on the higher self for a Russian-speaking audience. During this time, about 4,000 to 4,500 people have passed through my school. I've been working on this topic for 20 years. Today, my school is one of the largest and most famous specialized schools for connecting with the higher self in the Russian-speaking world. And then I suddenly realized that it is finally time to reach out to the masses, so to speak. Yes, to the much wider world and to the incredibly vast expanse of the entire global internet. All the professional skills I have carefully developed, all the dedicated practices I have refined, and all the quick entries, thorough checks, and rigorous exams I have built over the last 10 years are now being brought to a truly global level. I now invite you to join a brand new, specially discounted group for the comprehensive Return to the True Self course, now available in English for students everywhere. 6 months of work on stopping the internal dialogue, working with blocks, and focusing on actually accessing the higher self. Answering both simple and complex questions regarding purpose, contact with God, and with the planet. Answering basically any questions on any topic, including work, relationships, and anything at all. Manifesting desires through the higher self, viewing past lives through the higher self, and everything that didn't fit into the first 5 months in a separate 6th one. And after that, you'll have the opportunity to join the alumni club, as well as the chance to continue your studies at the 2nd level of the school. The price for the discounted groups is discounted. You can find all the information about this below at the link under this video.